So I'm going to ask your patience, and the rest of you come back at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Same process as how you got through here today, and we'll start with jury selection for the remaining 3 at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Feel free to use any of the hand sanitizer and wipes that are around, and we'll see 3 of you tomorrow. Number 85, if you could remain. Thank you. Okay, juror 85, if you could come on up here. And good afternoon, have a seat. A few things before I turn you over to the attorneys for some questioning. First is I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you. First of all, there's plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass between us, and the lawyers also have plexiglass in front of them. My point being, if you would feel more comfortable or feel it would be necessary to speak clearly to take your mask off, you may do so. Even though I've had 1 vaccine shot so far, I keep this on no matter what, just to be ultra safe. But whether or not you have it on is totally up to you.
Sure.
And even if at some point you take it off and you want to put it back on, feel free. In either case, mask on or mask off, I ask that you, and that's probably about perfect on being close to the mic, because we want to be able to hear you. So don't get too worried about it, because I'll move you if necessary. But I think you're going to be just fine. So with that, let me thank you first for filling out the questionnaire. It gives us a good basis to start from. And is there anything, first of all, was everything true on that questionnaire?
Yes.
Is there anything on the questionnaire that you wanted to add to or change that you can think of right off the top of your head?
I think I called out a couple work concerns. That was based on the previous timing
Okay.
of it being earlier in March. I don't have those concerns
Okay.
any longer.
So no distractions from work related?
Correct.
Any other problems with being here for 4 weeks?
No.
Other than the fact that it's 4 weeks of jury duty?
Right.
Okay. Well, important case, obviously, and it will take some time. But we want to make
Yes.
sure that you aren't going to be distracted by personal things or financial hardship, anything like that.
Correct.
You could make it work the 4
Yes.
weeks? All right, excellent. Now, getting back to the questionnaire, the attorneys will be asking you more specific questions. And you might realize at some point, it's been a few months, that maybe there are things you should add, or maybe something's even inaccurate. Maybe even some of your opinions have evolved. My point being, make sure you feel comfortable saying something different than what's on the questionnaire. If it's accurate, that's what we want to know more than anything else, okay?
Yes.
You weren't supposed to read any newspaper articles or see any media about this case. But we realize with the passage of a few months since the questionnaire that inadvertently you might have been exposed to some information. See a headline, see a news blurb on the TV, something like that. What, if anything, have you been exposed to in the time between the questionnaire and today?
I did see a couple headlines really about jury selection beginning.
Okay.
And then I did hear I guess you could call the headline on the recent settlement
Okay.
that was reached. I don't know the result of the settlement. All I heard was record-breaking settlement, but I don't know any of the details.
Didn't hear any numbers or?
I didn't. I don't know what the number is.
Okay, let's kind of compare those two. I assume that just being told that jury selection has begun and that really doesn't affect your decision as a juror?
No.
Doesn't affect your partiality?
No.
When you're finished with the questionnaire, at some point you were just asked, could you be fair and impartial? And you said yes. Do you think that the news about the settlement would move you off that position?
No.
Okay, tell me about that, why you think it does or does not affect your ability to be a fair juror in this case.
I don't know the details of it,
Okay.
of what the the settlement was really even about. And I believe civil suits are often settled. I don't think that that declares guilt one way or another. I think people settle for many reasons.
All right. And you understand that civil suits have different laws, different legal issues to resolve, different from a criminal case. Would you accept that?
Yes.
All right. Do you think it's going to bear at all in your mind? For example, if a juror were to say in a deliberation room for some reason, well, what about this settlement? What do you think you'd say to a juror who brought that up if it was not part of the evidence?
If it wasn't part of the evidence, then it's not something that I would consider.
Okay. And that's the bottom line. You've been exposed to information about this case. Some might be accurate, some not. But the bottom line is you have to put aside anything you've heard outside this courtroom and even any opinions you may have formed. It's all right to have those opinions. That's not what we're saying. We're saying as a juror you have to focus on what is said and heard in court, to look at all the evidence from what happened in court, and to put everything else aside, including opinions. Can you do that?
Yes.
All right. Did you recognize any witnesses on the witness list?
I did not.
Okay. We saved the easiest one for last. So, what I'm going to do is turn it over to the attorneys. But before that, do you have any questions for me?
No.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, you may inquire as to Juror 85.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for taking the time to fill out your questionnaire. I just have a few general questions to kind of go through first, and then I'm going to come back and ask you some questions about some of your responses to the questionnaire. Would that be okay?
Yep.
All right. I just want to, before I do that, I just want to follow up with your work concerns. You indicated that, I know that in your jury questionnaire you had two kind of principal concerns about serving. One had to do with your employment, and the other had to do with your small child.
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of your employment, one of your concerns was that you weren't going to be paid because you're some type of consultant, not identifying the nature of your job. Is that correct?
I personally will be. My company wouldn't be because I serve clients.
Sure.
So my hourly bill rate is not going to the company, but I have had conversations around that, and it's not a concern of the partners. So.
Okay, so the company is willing to kind of let you go for a while.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, but you'll still be paid, so you'll be able to pay your bills
Yes.
and things like that. But you do have a small child as well.
Yep.
And you'll be able to kind of make childcare arrangements. Family, friends will help if need be.
Yes.
And it's possible, I guess the question is, we know for sure that during jury deliberations, the jurors would be what's called sequestered, meaning put in a hotel. We have no idea how long those deliberations will take. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
It is technically possible that at some point for the trial itself, jurors could be sequestered. It could be 4 weeks, it could be 2 weeks, it could be, we have no idea, right? It depends on what happens. How do you feel about that?
It would be a challenge, more for my husband, but we'll make do what we have to do.
Okay, fair enough. And that's what we just want to make sure is there's not an undue burden on you or your family, right? Okay, so let's assume that you and I were to meet in some other circumstance, social event, professional event, and we strike up a conversation. What are a few things I learn about you during that conversation?
Probably what we've already covered. I'm a working mom and a wife, and that's probably about all.
Okay. Any special interests, hobbies, things of that nature? Or are you just busy with children?
Busy, yes. Spending a lot of time at hockey rinks in the wintertime, but yeah, just busy with work and family.
Okay, great. You obviously had heard about this case before you learned you were a potential juror in this case, right?
Yes.
And so my question is, when you got this packet and were asked to fill it out and it identified that you may be a potential juror in this case, particularly, what was your initial reaction?
Pretty surprised. It was my first time being summoned, and kind of what are the odds of getting on a pretty high-profile case? So surprised, but
All right. Any concerns for your personal safety, safety of your family, COVID-19 concerns, any of that?
I would say some concern, for when juror names are eventually released. I don't know the timing of that. That it would be something I'd have to consider. But generally, I don't have safety concerns coming down here today or immediate concerns.
Okay. What did you think of the government center when you got down here today? I mean, with military and the fencing and all of that.
It was a little unnerving after I found how to get in. It was a little surprising to see that amount of presence, but I understand why.
Okay. So when you say a little concerning, I mean, what was concerning about it?
I just meant unnerving, not concerning. Just,
okay. Just kind of like takes your breath away
wow,
almost.
right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When the judge told you this afternoon that we're going to do what we can to keep you confidential, or your identity confidential, how did that make you feel?
Very much appreciated in those efforts.
Okay. And do you, as you referenced, your name at some point in the future may be released. Are you okay with that?
I am. Again, I'd love to know what kind of time frame that looks like, or how you even go about making a determination of that timing. But it is what it is, and it's how these work. So. Okay,
fair enough. Now I know. Well, let me ask you: in your personal or professional life, have you ever been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
Yes, probably not in a he said, she said type of fashion, but resolving conflict can be part of my job at times.
Again, without identifying where you specifically work, but your job is in sort of the reorganization of corporations, right?
Correct.
All right. And does that mean people have to get fired or potentially laid off?
It can, yes.
Okay. And sometimes people don't like that, I'm assuming?
Correct.
All right. And so that can be a pretty heavy burden, right? I mean,
yes.
People's well-beings, right? So kind of, your role, if you were to be selected as a juror in this case, is to kind of deal with a pretty heavy burden and resolve some conflict. Do you understand that?
Yes.
So drawing from your personal or professional experience, what tools do you bring to the table to help, muddle through the evidence and resolve conflict amongst jurors?
A lot of listening, obviously, to hearing all sides and all perspectives, all opinions, asking a lot of questions to try to kind of get at the root of differentiating what an opinion is versus what fact might be. Ensuring that everybody is in line with what the outcome needs to be. It's probably step number one. And it's really about listening and just asking questions.
Okay. Now, let's assume that the conflict is between yourself and another juror. which is different than conflict
Mm-hmm.
between two other people. Agreed?
Mhm.
How do you approach that?
A little more yes and no.
Oh, sure, yes.
Just because we're taking down the it's a normal conversation, but a little more formal in here.
Yes.
Thank you.
So how do you approach a situation if you're involved in the conflict versus an observer or mediator of a conflict?
I guess, stating again, what the information I know, explaining why I feel a certain way, using information if it's available to back that up. So, trying to make things more data or evidence driven instead of emotional or opinion based. And then, obviously listening to the other party, again, asking questions, and, really just trying to come to a resolution. Ideally, that's the ideal situation is you agree or you agree to disagree. But understanding that, in certain situations, you don't always come to that mutual, agreement.
Right. So you understand that one of the rules that would apply would be a unanimous jury verdict,
Yes.
one way or another. And I guess the question becomes, for you, would you abandon your belief or your principle simply to gain consensus with the group and reach a decision? Or are you the type that's going to kind of dig in your heels and stand your ground?
That's a good question. I would probably stand my ground.
Okay. Would it depend on what the issue is?
Yes, yeah. But yes, if I'm firmly believing in a situation, that's going to be my opinion.
Okay, thanks. In your personal or professional life, have you ever been called upon to determine whether someone is telling the truth about a situation?
Not in my professional life. Maybe trying to think of a situation with my child that may have come up.
Sure. Well, I think that's a good example, right? Someone calls and says your child was involved in this situation, and then you ask your child, did this happen? And your child has a completely different answer, right? How do you determine, is the person reporting the incident telling me the truth, or is my child telling me the truth?
In that situation, I again like to ask a lot of questions because I think you can uncover a lot even by asking the same question in different ways. You can get at very different answers. Again, hearing both sides independently, and then putting the puzzle pieces together really based on what you hear.
Okay. Can you think of a time that you were 100% convinced you were right about something and later learned you were wrong?
Yes.
All right. How do you respond to that? Are you kind of blow it off and go, well, lesson learned, or do you take that lesson and apply it to future action?
Oh, absolutely. Take it and apply it. That's how we all learn and grow.
Sure. Now, ultimately, at the end of the case, the judge will instruct you on what the law of this case is.
Yes.
And it may be that you think the judge is wrong, or you think the law should change. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you disagree or think it's wrong?
Yes.
I'm going to just follow up with a few questions on your questionnaire. Again, you had some knowledge about this incident prior to being summoned as a juror, and just like everybody else who's come in, there are varying degrees of what you know, what you heard, what you talked about, right?
Yes.
So it's perfectly okay, and if you have formed opinions about this case, again, perfectly okay, all right? So I'm not going to try to trick you. I'll read the question. I'll read what you wrote if I have a question about it. And if you want, I may ask you to explain a few things, okay?
Yes.
First, though, there's some questions on the questionnaire and some reference to a video that was taken. There were several videos that have been released publicly, and I want to make sure which video you're referring to, or so we're on the same page. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There was a video that was taken by a bystander. That video got uploaded to Facebook, I believe, and then from there it went viral, became a news story. That's one video. Then there were some body camera videos that were released from police officers, and then there were some security camera from local businesses that were released. Did you see one of those, all of them, or do you not remember?
I do remember seeing them. I don't know the source. So I don't know if it was bystander or security cameras. I don't know what the source was. They were the clips on the news. So
Okay.
that's what I saw.
That was kind of my follow-up question, was the videos that you saw, did you see them like in the news, or did you go on to social media and look for like a longer, fuller length version, so to speak?
No, just what was shown on the news.
Okay. You were asked, I think generally we're probably talking about the same video. It appears to show Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd's arrest, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You indicated that you had seen those videos 6 or more times. Is that because you saw it so frequently on the news, or because you watched it intentionally 6 or more times?
Due to the news.
Okay. Now, you were asked if you had formed a general impression of Mr. Chauvin, and you indicated that it was somewhat negative. And when asked why, you wrote, "They appeared to take little action despite the pleas of George and bystanders." So I guess the question is, what was it that caused you to have this negative, somewhat negative opinion about Mr. Chauvin?
It was really just my perception of what I saw on the news.
Right. Did you ever do any sort of investigation, kind of look what happened before, what happened after?
I did not.
And the question ultimately is that, during the course of this trial, evidence will be presented. Mm-hmm. Witnesses will testify. There may be exhibits. If we're talking about a four-week trial, it's going to be a fairly sizable number, right? Can you put what you saw kind of to the side and judge this case exclusively on the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yes, believe so.
Okay. Is it a yes or I believe so?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And you understand under the law, Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent.
Yes, I do.
So you can start kind of with a clean slate, ground zero, presume him innocent.
Yes.
And will you do that?
Yes.
You were also asked about your general impression of Mr. Floyd. You wrote neutral. And when asked why, you said, "I only know that George died as a result of this encounter. I do not know what his actions were prior to this taking place." Did you ever learn anything about what happened before?
I did not.
Okay. And you indicate that you knew he died as a result of this encounter. Did you form an opinion that Mr. Chauvin was responsible for Mr. Floyd's death?
No. I never heard, what a cause of death was. So ultimately I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. And ultimately, much of the evidence that is admitted in this case may center around that very issue. So again, you can listen to the evidence as it's presented in court, and make your decision based on that and not any opinions or information you may have learned beforehand?
Yes.
You were asked whether you or your friends, your family members, or coworkers had discussed this matter, or whether you had posted any opinion online. Do you recall?
I've not posted about it online. The only conversations I had with coworkers were really just checking in with how people were feeling, mainly after the riots were happening downtown, just checking in on people, making sure everyone was doing well.
Say, do you have friends or coworkers that live in the downtown or in the general area where the riots were taking place?
Yeah, a few coworkers. Mm-hmm.
And so were you more concerned for their physical safety, and that's what you mean by checking in?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that leads into the next question. One of the questions you were asked about whether there was a negative or positive effect as a result of the protests that occurred after Mr. Floyd's death. And you wrote both. I think there are both negative and positive effects that have resulted. Can you tell me what the negative is and what the positive is?
Sure. Negative was, obviously there was a lot of damage done to businesses and probably homes. Destruction and fires and that was obviously negative. The positive things that I see that came out of it were really giving people a voice that maybe didn't feel heard, and getting people rallied around some of the issues that they feel they face today.
Okay. And you understand ultimately this trial is not about broader social issues.
Yes.
And regardless of your opinion on those, do you feel you can be a fair and impartial juror?
I do.
And you would base your, again, decision on the evidence and not your perception of whatever social issues may exist.
Right, yes.
You were asked or presented with a series of statements, just sort of blanket statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion from the range of some strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you remember that generally?
Yes.
And ultimately, I'm going to just cover a couple of these with you. One of the statements reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that statement. Can you explain why you somewhat agreed with that statement?
It's really just a perception that I have based on, what I hear. I have no data or information to back that opinion up. It's really just, what you hear in the media.
Sure. One of the questions was about the media, and it said discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you had no opinion of that. So the media, do you think the media conflates it or understates it?
I don't know.
Okay. You were asked whether police in your community make you feel safe, and you checked that you strongly agree with that.
Yes.
And you were asked about your position on defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you took no opinion. Why?
Honestly, I don't know enough about that to have an opinion. I'm not sure exactly what it means.
Okay.
Or what effect that would have on the police.
Okay. You were asked or provided with the statement, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while on duty, and you somewhat disagreed with that. Why?
Police officers are human. They're not robots that are programmed to all behave in the exact same way. So I feel like, you know, as humans, they can make mistakes as well. And, you know, if there's a case in which people feel like anyone was mistreated in any way, I think they should be asked about it, and asked to explain why any certain events took place.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. You took a neutral response to both, and you wrote, "I do not know enough information about this cause to have an opinion based on facts."
Yes.
I mean, do you have an emotional response to either of those causes?
I don't.
You were asked, or you identified that you have some relatives who work in the medical profession.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you were to be a juror on this case, would you, and you hear medical testimony, would you call your relative and say, "Hey, this is what they're saying, what do you think? Teach me about how this works"?
No.
Okay. You were asked a series of questions about your opinions regarding the justice system, and one of the questions reads, "Do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not?" And your response was, "I believe it works, but there's room for improvement." Where do you see there's room for improvement?
That's a tough one.
I know it may not be your area of expertise, but
Definitely not. You know, it's more of a general statement, and you know, I find the perfect process is really hard to come by. So I believe there's room for improvement in everything we do. Again, humans are involved in the justice system, so there's always room for improvement when humans are involved.
Fair enough. Lastly, you were asked if you wanted to serve as a juror in this case. Again, you checked the not sure box, and you wrote, "Very high profile, potential to be targeted in a negative way, and the potential length of the trial would be difficult due to the job and family." I think we've alleviated the job and family issues.
Yes.
Would you be so concerned about your personal safety or your family safety as a result of your verdict that it would cause you to vote a particular way to avoid what you view as a potential targeting?
No.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. If I may have a few minutes, Your Honor.
Sure.
Mr. Slusher.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, juror number 85, you listed that you previously lived 18 years in an unnamed river town. Is that your childhood home?
Yes.
And then you left the state of Minnesota for some period of time. Is that right?
Yes.
Lived in Wisconsin. Did you just go across the river? Did you go far?
Not too far, just for school.
Okay. So when you were living in Wisconsin, were you kind of in the western Wisconsin area?
Yes.
Okay. Reading your job description, I don't want you to give away, where you work specifically, but help me understand what exactly do you do as a organizational management consultant? What does that mean?
So generally I help organizations transition through change, and that change could be any number of things. It could be organizational change. It could be large transformations. They could be, digital or technology type of changes. So I focus more on the people side of getting people to, change behaviors, ways of working. There could be a lot of things involved in that. There could be org design work. There could be, shifts in where people work, how they work. So it's really helping organizations, typically leadership teams of those organizations, just navigate through times of change.
So give me an idea of the size of your clients, not how many you have, but like the organizations themselves.
That varies pretty greatly. I work with some local companies and all the way up to global companies.
Okay. And the types of change that you're helping them navigate, that could include technology changes, implementing different things to make them more efficient? Is
Yep.
that
Mm-hmm.
okay? And personnel changes as well?
Yes.
What about like corporate culture? If there have been issues with an organization that, say, has experienced some instances of sexual harassment or discrimination, do you help companies navigate through culture changes as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How do you do that, and how did you get a background doing that?
That's a great question. Starting with background, it was kind of an evolution. You start, or my career path anyway, started more in the probably technology side. You kind of get good at that and get good at, making or helping organizations move in a new direction. And then it just evolves over time with experience. You kind of work into more of the complex issues or things that face companies, like culture. It's not, yesterday you press the B button and tomorrow you press F. That's pretty straightforward. But when you're talking about culture, it's pretty significant in getting people to really change their mindsets and how they think about the work they do.
And can you just describe a particular challenging culture change climate that you've helped a company navigate?
I worked with a company who was not performing, was underperforming pretty significantly to the point where they were looking at closing, which would have affected thousands of employees. And we did a lot of things around, there were obviously a lot of efficiency, things that needed to kind of be implemented. But with that, we also needed to help shape people's thinking around how can we as a company be more efficient? Do I need to do X, Y, and Z? Do I need to always travel to go see various partners? So just really getting people to think more in a cost-conscious, effective manner. Really getting employees even down to what I call line level employees of what can you do in your day-to-day work that can help. What's slowing you down, what's getting in your way, how can we make this more efficient? So really engaging the whole company at all levels. It wasn't just a CEO saying this is what we're going to go do. It was really engaging everybody and having a voice in what that looked like.
That actually sounds really hard. It sounds like a hard job.
It is.
Yeah. So you're trying to, not just have a CEO say, this is what's going to happen. We need an attitude change. Here's what your new attitude is.
Right.
You're trying to get people to kind of buy in.
Yes.
Have you then, in a larger organization, I'm assuming you've had to work through areas of diversity and inclusion. in order to get buy-in from all members of the organization?
Diversity and inclusion in particular as a...
Yes.
I have not played in D&I specific work.
How are you, I guess, in helping an organization through any kind of change, able to get buy-in from all members of the organization, no matter what their role or background is?
Mm-hmm. You know, it really starts with identifying, you know, who is it that we need to move and how. And how does that impact what they do today? And a lot of times you identify multiple different groups. Not everybody's the same. So you have different groups within a company. You might have people that have been there for 50 years, and changing the mindset at that point is going to be very difficult. You might have someone that's, you know, just joined 6 months ago, and it's not going to be as hard for them. So making sure that you understand kind of, I guess, the demographics of the company and the employees we're working with. And then, you know, tailoring the approach you take to each of those groups. Also involving them as much as possible in, you know, what does the future look like? You know, and again, giving people a voice to be part of it. And if they're able to be part of something like that and feel like they're heard and are able to, it gives them a sense of ownership in it, and also in seeing it be successful.
Thank you. I'm going to shift topics a little bit here and ask you if you've ever known anyone, had a close friend or loved one or family member who struggled with drug addiction or alcohol addiction?
I don't.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion, if you were to hear about a person who, say, struggled with drug or alcohol addiction, would you have an opinion about that person? That maybe, say, for example, some people might say if you are taking illegal drugs and something happens to you, you have yourself to blame. What do you think of that statement?
I disagree with that statement, and I'm not an expert, but you know, I believe there are, you know, addiction is you know, addiction, and I don't think a lot of people necessarily choose to. You know, no one would choose to have addiction, I would assume, as part of their life. So no, I wouldn't make a judgment on that.
Okay. You also indicated that you have a pretty strong faith in the police in your community.
Yes.
You agree? You acknowledge that there are, you know, the media has indicated that you know, instances of discrimination, and that maybe in some instances police do not treat people of color the same, or blacks or people of color the same as whites. Mm-hmm. You agree with that?
Yes.
And I'm just interested in what you would base it on. Have you had conversations with, say, friends or coworkers who've shared their own experiences with you?
Again, it's mostly what I hear in the media. I don't have a personal experience with a situation like that. So it's mostly what I'm hearing in the news.
You were accidentally locked out of a store without having something without paying for it, or had that experience?
Have I ever?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, but I think I probably set off the alarm system maybe, or gotten too close to the door. But otherwise, no.
Kind of inadvertent, shocking, right?
Yes.
And how would you expect to be treated by the police if you made it all the way to your car with something you hadn't paid for in your community?
How would I expect to be treated? I guess respectfully, and, probably questioned, did I mean to exit the store with this, or why do I have this and I didn't pay for it?
And do you feel that you would cooperate with the police?
Yes.
And do you think that's an important thing for someone to do, to cooperate with the police when you're interacting with them?
Yes.
And some people might say that if you don't cooperate with the police and something happens, then you have yourself to blame. You should have cooperated with the police. What do you think of that statement?
I would generally agree with that statement.
Okay. And why is that?
I guess, I've probably been taught or learned along the way that, you respect police and you do what they ask. I, again, don't have any personal experience with that. But so anyone, that chose not to, do something a police officer asked, and then experienced any repercussions from that, it's the same if I was speeding and I decided not to pull over. If there's a police behind me with his lights on and I decide not to pull over, that's on me.
Mm-hmm. You indicated in the questionnaire that you might have find some difficulty in viewing graphic images.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us about that? Is there any particular reason for it, or is it just in general?
No, just in general. It's not something I would seek out to watch.
If you were called to serve as a juror in this matter, you would be viewing some images that you may find disturbing. Knowing that that's part of the jury service and part of the requirements here, would you be able to do that, or would you find just graphic images so disturbing that you wouldn't be able to focus on the evidence and really put those images in the proper context?
Yes.
That you would find that too difficult, and
sorry.
you would not? That was a terrible question. So.
I'm not sure what the question was anymore. Yes, I would be able to, to watch what was being presented.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Honor. We pass for cause.
You will be on this jury. I think what I'm going to do is let you go for the day with instructions not to pay attention to any news, at least tonight. Try and avoid the news generally. We've been telling people don't read any articles or pay attention to anything about this case. But I think, given the exposure and the saturation, try and avoid the news generally as much as you can. The deputy will take some paperwork from you. We'll have you report March 29th at 9 a.m. If we contact you, make sure you answer the phone in case there's any change in schedule, but otherwise we'll see you on March 29th. Any questions?
No.
In fact, we will contact you before then because there might be instructions regarding parking or just generally if there's a time frame difference. But
Okay.
just to remind you if nothing else.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.